the fabric of her name. Episode 3. What the Wind Brought In. Zina had always been the kind of student teachers noticed not for trouble, but for her quiet brilliance. In her plain uniform, hair braided close to her scalp, she raised her hand only when she was sure of the answer. But when she spoke, the class listened. It was her literature teacher, Mrs. Aligbe, who first suggested she submit her essay to a national writing competition. The essay had been about memory, how things forgotten by the world are remembered by the heart. It wasn't just good, it was striking. It carried a wisdom far beyond her 16 years. Weeks later, she had won. The letter had arrived with the school's stamp still wet from the registrar's desk. A scholarship, full tuition, books, plus prep fees for external exams. Zina had stared at it for nearly 10 minutes, her eyes scanning the bold print again and again, as if waiting for the truth to blink away. "Mama, I got it," she had whispered, voice shaky. "I really got it." Ebele hadn't smiled. She took the letter with careful fingers, eyes narrowing as they reached the sponsor's name, written tiny at the bottom. Mrs. Clara Okoye. A slow, unreadable silence passed between them. It had started weeks earlier, after Zina's essay gained quiet acclaim from her school. The essay was a meditation on memory and silence, of what mothers never say aloud, and it struck something raw in every adult who read it. It made its way from the teacher's desk to the school principal, and finally to the PTA chair, Mrs. Clara Okoye. The school celebrated it, quietly but proudly. Zina's name went up on the notice board. A small write-up made it into the local education bulletin, and suddenly, people who had only vaguely known her as the girl who always sits in front began to pay closer attention. It was around this time that Mrs. Clara Okoye began to take an interest. She was head of the PTA, a familiar figure at the school, elegant, composed, the kind of woman who wore her authority lightly but firmly. Her daughter, Adanne, was in the same class as Zina. They were best friends. Now, weeks later, the scholarship was official. Zina carried the weight of her mother's silence with every school day, unsure what she had done wrong. Her uniform was new, her books didn't have torn pages, her backpack was no longer borrowed. But her mother was distant and watchful. The first time Clara met Zina was after a PTA meeting. She had called her aside and smiled. "You wrote this?" she asked, holding the stapled essay between manicured fingers. "Yes, Ma." Clara had tilted her head. "You wrote about a woman who carries a memory like a garment she no longer fits. Where did that come from?" Zina had looked down, unsure how to answer. "Your teacher says you need a laptop for writing." "Yes, Ma." Clara smiled wider. "You're gifted, very gifted. You will get it." And just like that, the wheels turned. What Zina didn't know was that it was the Okoye's family that sponsored her scholarship. Weeks before, he had come home unusually quiet. He had gone upstairs and stood at the window for a long time, fingers tapping the sill, eyes searching for something outside that wasn't there. Later that night, he'd brought up the idea. "There's this girl, brilliant, top of her class, her name's Zina." Clara had blinked. "Why her? She deserves a chance. Some students just stand out." Clara hadn't pressed then, but now, as she sat across from him in their bedroom, the shadows in her chest were gathering. She folded her arms. "Why didn't you tell me it was that girl?" Chief Okoye glanced up from his tablet. "What girl?" The one whose mother runs a small tailoring shop behind Aria Market, that Ebele woman. His pause was too long. So you know her, Clara said, tone too calm. I've seen her. We're not close. You said you saw a brilliant student. You didn't say you'd already met the mother. She just seemed familiar. And I asked about the girl, found out she's struggling, but brilliant. Clara leaned back against the pillows. So, out of all the children in that school, it's this one you want to save? Chief Okoye didn't answer. Clara's voice dropped, threading suspicion and something colder. Is she yours? What? She stood, pacing. Zina, is she your child? His voice rose. Clara! He screamed. He shoved the question aside, muttering words not heard. She turned to face him. You don't want to respond as usual. The word came too fast. Yes, he said. Just take care of her. If she needs anything, let me know. Clara has learned not to push. She knows just how hard-headed her husband gets when he's not ready to talk. Because even though Chief Okoye had never been an unfaithful man, never been cruel, he had secrets. She knew the look of a man carrying something he wouldn't say. She had seen it once before, years ago. That same distant silence now settled over him again. But this wasn't the time to fight ghosts. Not yet. Clara sighed and picked up her perfume bottle from the dresser. You do whatever you want, she said, turning away. Just remember, charity begins at home, and secrets don't bury themselves. He didn't respond, only sat there, staring at the closed door after she left. Across town, Ebel sat on the edge of her bed, holding the letter one more time. Zina's joy had already woven itself into the house, but Ebele could feel the weight behind it. Gifts like this rarely came without threads attached, and she had spent her life learning how to spot threads before they tangled around the throat. She folded the letter carefully, tucked it beneath her pillow, and whispered, God, let her be safe. Let her be free of what binds me. But the past was already on the move, and its footsteps echoed closer with each quiet act of kindness.